Hi, and welcome to Vietnam Insights. I'm Matthew Lowry.
And I'm Adam Correll.
Today, we're going to be talking about business structures in Vietnam. Interesting, Adam, we've both been here around 20 years in Vietnam, but come from very different perspectives and different service offerings about market entry and structuring. So I'm interested to sort of see how your view aligns with my view about structures and the appropriateness and what we need to understand and what we need to do.
Sounds good, Matt. Let's look at the options for corporate structures: LLC, JSC, and others.
So JSCs, joint stock companies, are effectively public companies. LLCs, limited liability companies, are your private companies, and which have parallels in most common law jurisdictions. They are subtly different in Vietnam. In my view, and 99.5% of companies are LLCs, and that represents most common structures for market entry. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. And also, an interesting point would be that some companies that do enter the market try to imitate the JSC, what they've done before in other markets. And you might want to explain some of the difficulties going that way.
So the public company, very good point. So subtle difference here. A limited liability company does not have shares, and that's the confusion why people tend to go JSC. A JSC has shares. So a limited liability is percentage of capital contributed. So if you've contributed $50,000 and there's $100,000 total capital, you own 50%. Where shareholding structure gives you more flexibility in how you structure the shares and your share structures. That sounds like a JSC is often a common way to go. However, the governance and the structure behind that tends to move to a LLC being far simpler, is often more appropriate. And particularly if it's 100% foreign owned, you need 3 shareholders minimum for a JSC.
Yep, thanks. Linking into that, let's look at the flexibility needed as well when planning, so you can enter but also exit. So can you explain the importance of having a holdco?
Well, you never enter, particularly a market which has significant restrictions, capital restrictions and compliance obligations that are not parallel to what we would expect in other countries, that you must be able to exit as part of your entry. If you don't get the exit planning and strategy sorted as part of your entry, you'll screw it up. That's to put it bluntly. So one of those strategies is having a holdco, because in Vietnam, every company, you've got a licensing process. Every company for foreign investors, you've got an M&A process that involves foreign investment review process as well as investment. If you have a holdco, you bypass that. So the holdco, the offshore, if you dispose the offshore structure or amend your offshore structure, you're not having to deal with the Vietnamese licensing authorities, and you're keeping the Vietnamese subsidiary intact as far as the authorities. There's no visible change to them. So having a holdco allows you to have an exit strategy without having to amend and deal with license and deal with issues at the Vietnam level.
Yep, so definitely helps with flexibility, removing some of the risk of not understanding the local market, attracting further investment and so forth.
And you can use the holdco to increase investment from foreign sources without having to touch the local company as far as who the share structures and what you're dealing with. So it gives a lot more flexibility and is a very common entry structure.
What about the governance structures and roles and responsibilities within the LLC and so forth?
Well, an LLC is a far simpler structure than a JSC. So an LLC, you need a legal rep. Legal rep is effectively like a common law director, but a Vietnamese company doesn't have individual capacity. The legal reps give them capacity. So it is subtly different to a lot of other places. So you need to have a legal rep or multiple legal reps, one resident, who takes the power and capacity. You need a general director who is like the general manager, but they're the operations. They provide the execution. And within that structure, you then have governance. You have either a members council representing shareholders above the structure, or a chairman, or both. And your structure is relatively straightforward. And it's important to understand, and we don't have time today, what those roles and skill sets are. A JSC gets more complicated depending upon how many shareholders and what shareholding they have. You might need a investment. You may need other committees sitting in there. Inspection committee. You may need a board of management. You need more involvement from external as well, potentially, depending on the share structure. There might be independent directors. So it becomes a very different beast, which is, again, LLCs far more practical. But those roles are interesting. And I know you've seen a lot of those, how to structure roles and particularly the legal rep.
Yeah. The legal rep is something that is a bit different than other markets because the responsibility falls on individuals, not on the company in a lot of situations. So any advice you'd give people when they're looking at the legal rep?
Well, the legal rep, the powers of the legal rep can be constrained in the charter. It's not commonly understood, but the company charter is the rule book of the company. And so we often consider constraining powers. So your resident legal rep actually may not have the same powers as the offshore legal reps. So you can structure it in a way that allows you to control powers, because the legal rep has full unfettered powers unless you actually control them. The second one is, who is that onshore legal rep? So having a foreign individual, having someone else acting on your behalf who understands your offshore requirements and the corporate governance requirements from the parent company is definitely something you consider. And it works in many cases, particularly if you're starting up and don't have reliable people in country that you can trust for your operations.
Yeah. I tend to lean towards a independent party sometimes to be that legal rep, where because I have seen mistakes where people employ an employee to be a legal rep. Yep. Matt, can you outline some of the challenges of having local staff as this legal representative?
The challenges are more in the early stages. Before you have that structured trust, before you've got everything in place, you're embedding someone with, if you're not careful, with full responsibility of the company. That can be a kingmaker or a queenmaker in some situations. You see that they're unfettered control, unfettered power, and the decisions they make. So having external advice, having external protection so that no one person involved in the business locally can control and can be dangerous, to put it in a blunt way, about what happens in a business. And we do see issues where you actually find someone so embedded you can't get rid of them.
Yes, we've all seen that. That leads into common mistakes and pitfalls, things to watch out for.
I'd start with governance, not understanding the governance regime, because you've got so many lodgements that are required in Vietnam that a lot of them are pointless from a business perspective. They're government data sets and etc. But that becomes problematic if you miss some of those. And even post-establishment, you've got 30 days bank account, tax registrations, or less than 30 days. You've got 90 days to bring your charter capital in. If you don't understand that, and if that back to the legal rep, if they're the one you're leaning on for guidance and they don't have the experience, you can actually have a company that really is significantly, has its hands tied behind its back before it starts, and it's going to have problems. Another one is dividends in Vietnam aren't that hard to get out if you're compliant. If you're a delinquent taxpayer or have a history of not doing things on time, the tax authority is not going to consent to your dividends being repatriated. Little things like that.
And with governance, how should companies approach the way they do it overseas and the models they have, with some adjustments that are required in Vietnam?
Oh, exactly, spot on. You take your foreign model and you bring that into Vietnam and then you localize it. Don't adopt a local model by default. You want your culture, your standards, your governance from abroad brought in as part of this process and localizing it and getting an expert advice about what is required and how that matches and parallels and how to control, how to keep the oversight, but your structure, that your power, code of authorities and responsibilities in the group, that you still have the same processes.
So what are the key takeaways?
I think the key takeaways are don't enter unless you know you can exit. You don't need to exit, but you must know it is, and the structure allows you to do so. Keep it simple. Really, the complexities in most cases are necessary and cause more trouble. Governance, understand obligations, put your global expectations and use them as a starting point, but understand local governance and don't get trapped into reliance on individuals in country, but employees particularly, because that individual reliance can actually cause more risks and benefits in many, many cases.
Thanks, Matt. Great to talk. Next episode, we'll look at taxation. I'm Adam Correll.
I'm Matthew Lowry. Thank you.
Thank you.